Yo, what's up, everyone? This is James and Reading English 100 Days Challenge. Today is day 28. So, since 1970, the work of the Japanese fashion designers has had an unequivocal impact on Western dress. Initiated by Issey Miyake and followed 10 years later by Yuji Yamamoto and Rei Kawakudo of Comme des Garçons. 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 And they offered a new and unique expression of creativity, challenging the established notions of status, display, and sexuality in contemporary fashion. Miyake celebrated 40 years in the fashion business in 2010, and Kawakudo and Yamamoto followed suit in 2011, making 30 years since their first show in Paris. In London, in London, in the spring of 2011, the Victoria and Albert Museum unveiled a retrospective of Yamamoto's work, commemorating his contribution to the world of fashion. In this Financial Times weekend of 11 October 2009, journalist and photographer Mark O'Flaherty wrote, "The middle aging of the trivialness of revolutionary Japanese design is as shocking as any of their more confrontational collections. To many of their modernist followers, they still seem like box fresh, radical upstarts. While the high street, they have only recently come into existence through diffusion projects with the likes of H&M and Adidas. So for decades on, have they really revolutionized the world of fashion? Japanese fashion designers, the work and the influence of Issey Miyake, Yuji Yamamoto, and Rei Kawakudo is a book which will provide you with the knowledge that you will need to answer this question. So is it not only a study of the aesthetics of fashion, but it is a study of cultural aesthetics and the differences in this respect between East and the West. There are countless examples in the history of art which evidence how the West has been informed by the East, but not quite as dramatic as in the history of contemporary fashion design. So this book will provide an understanding of how Japanese thought, tradition, and advanced textile technology became an intrinsic part of the fashion design practice in the late 20th century. It will also show how the Japanese designers influenced a whole generation of young, emerging Belgian designers, among others, and how this intercultural and intergenerational influence has infiltrated the soul of the international fashion industry. Okay, looking back, it's a cultural heritage. The legacy of an understated elegance has become an intrinsic characteristic of modern Japanese design, clearly evidenced in the work of Issey Miyake, Yoji Yamamoto, and Rei Kawakudo of the Comme des Garçons. But in reality, it is historically underpinned by its Samuel origins, an intrinsic part of Japanese culture. While this may seem surprising to say at least, the historian Ikigami explains, in terms of dress, when the role of the samurai changed by the late 17th century, and their military duties were replaced by bureaucratic duties. Their lavish and luxurious costume made kimonos made from expensive fabric and worn especially for ceremonial purposes, which had been seen earlier as appropriate to their rank in society, were replaced by a more sober style of everyday clothing. Instead, the wearing of darker clothes, especially black, which symbolized self-discipline, became accepted as more sophisticated, urban, accurate, and a sign that good taste was expressed by subtle stylistic differences and intelligence in design. So also, other subtle practices such as wearing cotton kimonos lined with silk or using silk in undergarments became common. In other words, certain luxuries were not abandoned but simply hidden to all expecting the wearer. The historical precedent of placing restraints on excessively subtonous dress common across the cultures ultimately encouraged restraint and refinement. It is this adage that has been adopted by Japanese contemporary designers, yet still allowing the past to resonate in the present. Rei Kawakudo, in her typical masked way, asks, what is in front and what is behind? I think that's it for today, and thank you very much.